The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, usually my morning ritual's most comforting element, was suddenly overshadowed by the shrill, indignant squawk emanating from aisle 7. You cannot be serious. Is this what passes for customer service these days? I didn't even have to look to know. That was the sound of a Karen in her natural habitat, asserting dominance over an unsuspecting minimum wage warrior. Normally, I just grab my almond milk and make a swift exit, but today, something felt different. Maybe it was the lingering buzz from last week's invisible dog leash prank that racked up 20 million views, or perhaps the sheer audacity of this particular shriek. My name's Alex the Catalyst Thorne, and for the past 5 years, the internet has known me as the guy who turns mundane public interactions into viral gold mines. My YouTube channel, The Unsuspecting Target, isn't just about pranks, it's about exposing the absurdities of everyday life, often by simply being myself and letting the world react. I'm not about mean-spirited humiliation, it's more about subtle social experiments, pushing boundaries, and finding the humor in human behavior, especially when people assume they're in control. My background isn't glamorous. A few years in digital marketing, a lot of late nights, studying human psychology, and an inherent ability to remain deadpan in the face of chaos. I grew up in a small town, always the observer, the quiet kid taking mental notes. That's where I honed my ability to spot a moment before anyone else. Now, my office is pretty much anywhere there are people, and my colleagues are whoever happens to cross my path. My channel's success has allowed me to live comfortably, travel, and invest in better camera gear. But the core thrill remains the same, the unpredictable dance between reality and my carefully constructed illusions. Today, however, the illusion was about to become very, very real. I casually steered my shopping cart, its wobbly front wheel providing a perfectly innocent excuse for a slow approach, towards the source of the commotion. There she was, a woman in a perfectly pressed floral blouse, her hair a stiff, blonde bob that defied gravity, brandishing a bruised apple at a visibly uncomfortable teenage cashier. Her voice, sharp enough to cut glass, was now explaining, in excruciating detail, the exact trajectory of the apple's bruise, clearly, a grave injustice in her eyes. This is unacceptable. I demand to speak to your manager. This fruit is clearly damaged, and I refuse to pay full price for such blatant negligence. The poor kid behind the register looked like he was about to cry. It was classic Karen, textbook, even. My phone, usually my most powerful weapon, was tucked away in my pocket, forgotten amidst the casual grocery run. I hadn't come here looking for content, but sometimes, content finds you. I parked my cart a respectful distance away, pretending to examine a can of chickpeas, but my ears and peripheral vision were locked on. Karen was now gesturing wildly, the apple still clutched like a weapon. Do you understand the principle of this, young man? It's about standards, about integrity. The manager, a weary-looking woman with a name tag that read Brenda, finally arrived, probably having heard the commotion from the back room. Brenda, bless her heart, was clearly trying to de-escalate. Ma'am, I assure you, we can simply exchange the apple for you, or offer a full refund, no problem at all. But Karen wasn't having it. It's not about the refund, it's about the experience. This entire store is a disgrace. And you know what? I'm documenting this. Every single moment of this appalling customer service, that's when I saw it. Her other hand, not holding the bruised apple, now held a smartphone, its camera lens unmistakably pointed towards the cashier, then sweeping slightly, momentarily catching Brenda, and then, slowly, inexorably, it swung my way. For a split second, our eyes met. Her gaze was cold, accusatory, as if my mere presence in aisle 7 was part of the conspiracy against her perfectly unblemished fruit. I quickly ducked my head, feigning intense interest in the nutritional label of the chickpeas. My heart gave a little jolt. She wasn't just filming the cashier. She was filming the scene, and I was very much a part of the scene. A slow smile began to spread across my face, imperceptible to anyone watching. The catalyst part of my brain, usually dormant during grocery runs, had just fully engaged. This wasn't just some random Karen. This was a Karen who felt so entitled, so self-righteous, that she was willing to film everyone around her to prove a point. She was creating her own content, documenting her own rage, completely oblivious to the fact that her actions were about to become the very fuel for my next viral sensation. A tiny, almost imperceptible twitch formed in the corner of my eye. My mind, a whirlwind of possibilities, began to race. A plan, intricate and deliciously ironic, started to form. Karen thought she was exposing me for some imagined infraction, some silent agreement with the bruised apple. She had no idea she was handing me the perfect setup, the ultimate unsuspecting target. She had started filming my every move, completely unaware that she had just become my next, most epic, target. And oh, was this going to be fun? My internal prankometer, usually dormant during mundane tasks like grocery shopping, was now pinging off the charts. Karen, bless her meticulously coiffed head, was still at it. After her dramatic Apple monologue and the brief, unsettling eye contact, she had moved to the produce section, smartphone still conspicuously clutched in her hand. She wasn't actively filming me at this exact second, but her posture, her intermittent glances in my direction as she lectured a poor stock clerk about organic versus conventional kale, told me she hadn't forgotten me. She believed I was some minor player in the grand conspiracy against her consumer rights, and that was just the opening I needed. My research began immediately. I shifted my focus from chickpeas to organic berries, positioning myself strategically within earshot and peripheral vision. Alex Thorne, the viral prankster, was now operating in full stealth mode. Karen, I observed, had a particular disdain for anything she perceived as disorder. She meticulously restacked a pyramid of oranges that had slightly shifted, huffed at a misplaced carton of milk on a dry goods shelf, and even smoothed out a crinkled price tag with an almost obsessive zeal. Her verbal tirades weren't just about the product. They were about the system, the principle, the perceived lack of respect for order and rules. This was a woman who lived by unwritten, self-imposed code of conduct, and anyone deviating from it was an immediate target. Her phone, never far from her grip, was a constant companion, lifted at the slightest provocation. It wasn't just a recording device. It was an extension of her self-righteousness, a weapon to wield against perceived transgressions. I also noticed a slight limp in her left leg, subtle but present, suggesting perhaps an old injury or a chronic discomfort that might make prolonged standing or unexpected movements more challenging. This wasn't for malice, but for understanding her physical relationship with her environment, a key component in any good, non-harmful prank. As Karen moved towards the checkout, I trailed, maintaining a respectable, almost imperceptible distance. She chose the express lane, despite having a cart overflowing with more than the allowed item limit. When the cheerful cashier politely pointed this out, Karen's eyes narrowed. "I'm in a hurry, young lady. I'm sure you can make an exception for a loyal customer like myself." She then pointedly held up her phone, making sure the camera was visible. The cashier, clearly intimidated, sighed and began scanning. Karen wasn't just a rule follower for others. She was a rule breaker when it suited her, armed with the implicit threat of public shaming via her camera. The hypocrisy was almost beautiful. This was her core: control, order for others, and self-serving exceptions for herself, all enforced with the silent, judgmental lens of her phone. The first threads of my prank began to weave themselves. It wouldn't be about loud noises or messy spills. That was too crude, too obvious. This prank needed to be a slow burn, a psychological dismantling of her precious sense of order and control, using her own weapon, her phone, against her. And it needed to be public, for maximum impact. The grocery store was just the warm-up. The true stage would be wherever her inflated sense of entitlement led her next. My mind raced through scenarios. What if her own carefully documented evidence somehow turned against her? What if the disorder she so despised began to manifest around her, subtly, inexplicably, making her look like the cause? The idea was deliciously complex. My first, subtle preparation began right there, in the checkout line. As Karen began bagging her groceries, meticulously separating her organic produce from the dreaded non-organic items, I positioned my cart a little too close behind her, just enough to be noticeable, but not overtly aggressive. As she reached for a bag, I accidentally nudged my cart forward, causing a single, brightly colored children's toy, a small, squeaky rubber chicken, to roll from my basket directly under her feet. It was harmless, almost comical. Karen, startled, looked down, then glared at me. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, nudging the chicken away with her foot, clearly annoyed by the unexpected disruption to her bagging rhythm. I offered a mumbled apology, collected the chicken, and placed it back in my cart with an exaggerated sigh, as if I was the one inconvenienced. She didn't realize it, but the seed of random, inexplicable disorder had just been planted in her meticulously ordered world, and she had filmed it. Next, as she finished paying and began to push her overstuffed cart away, I struggled with the stubborn wheel on my own cart, causing me to fall slightly behind. This allowed me to slip a small, nearly invisible sticker, a tiny, innocent-looking, I less than 3 Mayhem logo, a subtle nod to my channel's ethos, onto the back of her cart, just below the handle. It was so small, so innocuous, she'd never notice it now. But it was there, a silent marker, a beacon for what was to come. I also accidentally dropped a single, bright blue pen near her car as she was loading groceries into her trunk. It rolled under her car, just out of easy reach. She paused, huffed, and briefly tried to retrieve it, but clearly decided it wasn't worth the effort. Another tiny, persistent piece of disorder in her path, barely registering, but slowly accumulating. Karen was to focus on her own filming, her own self-importance, to notice these tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in her environment. She was documenting my supposed transgressions, completely unaware that I was laying the groundwork for a much grander performance, using her own unwitting participation as the key. The stage was set, and Karen, with her ever-present camera, was about to become the reluctant star of her own chaotic reality show. The next day dawned with a crisp, almost mischievous energy, and I knew Karen would be out. People like her thrive on routine, on the predictable rhythm of their grievances. My research had yielded a few prime locations where she was a frequent, vocal patron, her favorite local coffee shop, a boutique clothing store known for its exclusive clientele, and the community park where she often walked her tiny, yappy terrier. I decided to start at the coffee shop, a seemingly innocuous setting for the beginning of Karen's carefully curated chaos. I arrived early, settling into a corner booth with a laptop, feigning work, my discreet cameras already rolling. My setup was simple: a micro camera disguised as a button on my jacket, another embedded in a pen on my table, and a small, high-quality audio recorder. All synced, all ready. The anticipation was electric. Exactly at 9:07 a.m., like clockwork, Karen strode in, clutching her phone like a talisman. She ordered her usual complicated, dairy-free, sugar-free, extra foam latte with an air of profound importance, already casting judgmental glances at a barista with an unconventional haircut. This was the moment. My first move was subtle, almost imperceptible. I had discreetly placed a tiny, almost invisible Bluetooth speaker, no bigger than a coin, near her preferred waiting spot. As she stood there, impatiently tapping her foot, a faint, almost subliminal sound began to play, the faint, repetitive drip of a leaky faucet. It was barely audible, just enough to register as an irritant. Karen twitched, her brow furrowed. She scanned the ceiling, then the counter, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features. The sound stopped. She shrugged it off, reaching for her latte. But the seed of something is off had been planted. As she moved to a small table near the window, carefully wiping it down with a sanitizing wipe she produced from her designer handbag, I initiated the next phase. My phone, hidden under the table, activated a small, motorized device. It was attached to the leg of her chair, designed to emit a very faint, almost imperceptible vibration every few minutes. Not enough to shake her, but enough to create a persistent, phantom buzz. Karen settled in, pulling out her own phone to, no doubt, document the cafe's perceived shortcomings. Suddenly, she flinched. She checked her phone. Nothing. A minute later, another faint vibration. Her eyes darted around. She tapped her phone on the table. Still nothing. She was clearly annoyed, a frown deepening on her face as she tried to pinpoint the source of the elusive tremor. She even picked up her chair and moved it slightly, blaming the floor. Her phone was still in her hand, sometimes held aloft, filming the disorder of the cafe around her. She wasn't just annoyed. She was genuinely perplexed, her sense of control subtly eroding. Later that afternoon, I tracked her to the community park. She was walking her terrier, a fluffy white dog that looked perpetually stressed, its tiny paws barely touching the ground as Karen pulled it along. She was, predictably, filming a group of teenagers laughing loudly near a fountain, no doubt gathering evidence of their disruptive behavior. This was my cue. I had prepared a special remote-controlled drone, disguised as a harmless, slightly oversized bumblebee. It was silent, agile, and equipped with a tiny, almost invisible string. As Karen paused by a particularly well-manicured rose bush, lecturing her dog about its sniffing habits, I launched the drone. It zipped past her, just close enough to cause a tiny gust of wind, rustling the perfect blonde bob she cherished. Karen flinched, swatting at the air. Her dog yapped hysterically. She looked around, confused. Was it a real bee, a bird? Her eyes narrowed as she tried to capture the unseen assailant on camera. The drone made another pass, this time a little closer, and with the invisible string. It subtly, expertly, untied one of her shoelaces. Karen stopped mid-sentence. She looked down, a bewildered expression on her face. Her shoelace was undone. She scoffed, bending down to retie it, clearly irritated by this inexplicable nuisance. As she bent, the drone quickly dropped a single, bright pink feather onto her shoulder. She stood up, brushed her perfect blouse, and then, a moment later, looked down again, noticing the feather. Her reaction was priceless, a tiny gasp, followed by a look of sheer bewilderment. She flicked it off with disdain, as if the universe itself was conspiring to put a single, frivolous feather on her pristine outfit. She even zoomed in with her phone on the spot where the feather had landed, as if it were a crime scene. I, meanwhile, was pretending to be engrossed in a particularly challenging game of Candy Crush on a nearby bench, my face a mask of serene indifference. My internal satisfaction, however, was bordering on giddy. The loop was tightening. Karen was becoming increasingly agitated, filming every minor annoyance, every tiny disruption, every inexplicable event that chipped away at her sense of orderly reality. She was building her own case, an unwitting co-conspirator in her own unraveling. The leaky faucet, the phantom vibration, the rogue bee, the untied shoelace, the random feather. Individually, they were nothing. Collectively, they were a relentless assault on her carefully constructed world. She was convinced these were all random acts of an incompetent universe, or worse, some unseen forces conspiring against her. Her filming, intended to expose the wrongdoers, was merely documenting her own escalating frustration, her own descent into a mild paranoia of the mundane. She was walking right into the trap, utterly oblivious that the quiet man on the bench, whose every move she had decided to document, was the very architect of her increasingly chaotic reality. And the best part, she wasn't stopping. Her phone was her shield, her sword, and soon, her undeniable evidence of a prank she didn't even know she was starring in. The culmination of my carefully orchestrated chaos was set for the local public library, Karen's supposed sanctuary of order and quietude. My research indicated she spent every Wednesday afternoon there, meticulously organizing a specific shelf in the nonfiction section, much to the quiet exasperation of the actual librarians. This was the perfect stage for her grand finale. I arrived an hour early, positioning myself near the designated silent reading zone, my usual array of hidden cameras and audio recorders operational. The air hummed with a quiet tension, a stark contrast to the storm I was about to unleash. Karen entered precisely at 2 p.m., a stern expression already etched on her face, phone in hand. She cast a disapproving glance at a teenager listening to music with headphones, then made a beeline for her chosen bookshelf. This library, with its hushed atmosphere and strict rules, was her ultimate comfort zone, the last bastion against the encroaching disorder of the world. And that's exactly where I planned to shatter it. As she began her meticulous rearrangement of books, straightening spines and tugging softly at any misplaced volume, I initiated the final, most impactful phase of the prank. My first move was to activate a series of tiny, high-frequency sound emitters I had strategically placed around her section earlier. These devices, disguised as innocuous paperweights and decorative bookends, began to emit a barely audible, yet intensely irritating, high-pitched whine. It was a sound designed to gnaw at the edges of one's consciousness, a mosquito buzzing perpetually in the mind. Karen flinched. She paused, tilting her head, her eyes darting around the serene library. Her meticulous movements faltered. She blamed the fluorescent lights, then the ancient air conditioning unit. Huffing with displeasure, she pulled out her phone, filming the ceiling as if the noise emanated from some faulty wiring. The whine persisted, a constant, low-level assault on her frayed nerves. Next, as she moved down an aisle, a series of pre-programmed book accidents began. A particularly heavy tome on civil engineering suddenly slid off its shelf, landing with a soft thud near her feet. Karen jumped, startled, her eyes wide. She glared at the shelf, then at me. I was reading a large, historical atlas nearby, as if I had willed the book to fall. She picked it up, slamming it back into place with unnecessary force. Moments later, from a different shelf, a stack of glossy art books cascaded down, scattering across the aisle. Karen let out a frustrated gasp. "Good heavens!" she muttered, visibly agitated. She looked around, her eyes wide with a mix of bewilderment and suspicion, eventually settling on me again. Her phone was still up, capturing every single unexplained incident. She was building her case, documenting the inexplicable chaos that was now, seemingly, following her. The librarian, a perpetually calm woman named Eleanor, approached, drawn by the unusual commotions. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur. Karen practically spat. "No, everything is not all right. This library is falling apart. Books are attacking me. And she pointed her phone's lens directly at me. He just sits there, watching." Eleanor glanced at me, then back at Karen, a polite but confused smile on her face. I offered a slight, apologetic shrug to Eleanor, then returned my gaze to my atlas, maintaining my unruffled composure. The librarian, clearly sensing a Karen moment, simply offered to help pick up the books, but Karen was beyond reason. The final straw came when she returned to her chosen shelf. I activated the most audacious part of the prank. My drone, hidden amongst the upper shelves, silently deployed a tiny, barely visible string. It snagged a small, empty bird cage I had subtly placed on a high ledge earlier, and began to slowly, almost imperceptibly, lower it directly into Karen's path. Simultaneously, a discreet speaker embedded within the cage played the muffled, distinct sound of chirping birds. Karen was meticulously organizing a section on American history when she heard it. A faint chirp, then another. She looked up, baffled. The birdcage, swaying slightly, was now descending directly in front of her face. This was it. The high-pitched whine, the falling books, the phantom vibrations from earlier, the rogue feather, it all coalesced into this single, absurd, undeniable moment of chaos. Karen's eyes widened, a mixture of terror and utter disbelief washing over her face. A birdcage, with chirping, in a library. It was the ultimate affront to her sense of order. What is this? She shrieked, a sound that echoed through the hallowed halls of the library, shattering the sacred silence. People looked up from their books, startled. Eleanor the librarian rushed over, a look of genuine alarm on her face. Karen, her face contorted with rage and humiliation, pointed directly at me, her entire body shaking. Her phone, still clutched in her hand, was recording every frenzied second of her meltdown. You did this, all of it, the noises, the falling books, that birdcage. I knew it. I have it all on video. You are a menace, a disruptor. I'm calling the police. I'm going to make sure you never step foot in a public establishment again. Her voice rose to a crescendo, her entire frame trembling. With righteous fury, she advanced on me, phone still filming, her finger jabbing the air in my direction. You think you can get away with this? You think you can ruin my day, my life? Well, guess what, mister? I have evidence. Every single move you made. My face remained perfectly calm, almost serene. A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of my lips. My eyes, however, held a distinct sparkle of triumph. This was the moment. She believed she had me, caught red-handed, exposed. She was so convinced of her own narrative, so blinded by her fury and her obsession with documenting my wrongdoing, that she was utterly unaware of the grander deception at play. She had filmed my every move, yes, but she had also filmed her own unraveling, her own descent into public spectacle, all from my camera. The anticipation was palpable. The audience, now gathered around, whispering, filming with their own phones, was about to witness the reveal of a lifetime. Karen stood before me, a picture of indignant rage, her phone a silent testament to her belief that she was the hero of her own story. She had no idea she was about to become the punchline. Karen stood, vibrating with rage, her phone mere inches from my face, its lens greedily devouring every detail of my calm, almost serene expression. The library, once a bastion of hushed reverence, was now a theater, packed with an impromptu audience. Whispers rippled through the crowd, interspersed with the clicks and flashes of their own smartphones. Eleanor, the librarian, looked on, utterly bewildered. This was it, the crescendo, the payoff. I let Karen finish her tirade, allowing her words to hang in the air, thick with accusation and righteous fury. When her voice finally cracked, her breath coming in ragged gasps, I slowly, deliberately, lowered the large historical atlas I had been pretending to read. My gaze met hers, clear and unwavering. Karen, I began, my voice soft but amplified by the sudden silence that had fallen over the library. You're absolutely right. I did do all of this. A triumphant, albeit shaky, smirk flickered across her face. Aha, you admit it. I knew it. I have it all on, and you filmed every second of it. I interrupted smoothly, a genuine smile now gracing my lips, which is perfect, because that's exactly what I wanted. Her triumphant expression dissolved, replaced by a flicker of confusion. What are you talking about? I reached into my pocket and, with a flourish, pulled out my own phone. With a single tap, I projected a familiar logo onto the nearest wall, catching the eye of everyone in the library. The bold, stylized the unsuspecting target, crowned with a mischievous emoji. Simultaneously, the speakers I'd subtly placed, Around the room disguised as discrete charging stations crackled to life, playing a rapid-fire montage. It started with a clip of Karen fuming about the bruised apple from the grocery store, then quickly cut to the phantom vibrating chair at the coffee shop, the bee incident in the park, the falling books, and finally, the ridiculous, chirping, bird cage now dangling just inches from where she stood. Each clip was expertly edited, a quick-cut reel of her escalating frustration, interspersed with my own deadpan reactions and the subtle glimpses of my hidden cameras. The final frame froze on the title card. Karen, the ultimate unsuspecting target. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Karen's face, already flushed with anger, drained of all color. Her mouth fell open, her eyes wide with a horrifying realization. The hand still clutching her phone dropped slowly to her side, trembling uncontrollably. The evidence she had meticulously collected, the hours she had spent documenting her grievances, were now being used against her, recontextualized into a viral spectacle of her own making. The very tool she used to assert her perceived authority had become the instrument of her grand humiliation. Her eyes darted from the projected image of her meltdown to my face, then to the growing crowd, who were now openly chuckling, some even filming her reaction to the reveal. A wave of murmurs and outright laughter rippled through the library. People pointed, whispered, and pulled out their own phones to capture this meta moment. "It's Alex Thorne, the prankster," someone exclaimed, a ripple of recognition spreading through the crowd. "Oh my God, he got a Karen." Another person giggled, trying to stifle their laughter. Eleanor, the librarian, initially aghast at the noise, now watched the projection with a mix of shock and reluctant amusement, a faint smile playing on her lips. It was clear the public reaction was one of pure, unadulterated entertainment. They recognized the familiar Karen archetype, and they reveled in the poetic justice of her own tactics being turned against her. Karen, however, was beyond laughter. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape, a hole to crawl into. The sheer, unadulterated humiliation of it all was written plainly on her face. Her breathing became shallow, ragged. For a moment, she looked as though she might scream again, but the sound caught in her throat, choked by the sudden, crushing weight of reality. The carefully constructed facade of her self-importance had crumbled, exposed for all to see. She turned, a ghost of her former self, and stumbled blindly towards the exit, abandoning her meticulous book rearranging and the very principle she had championed moments before. The door hissed shut behind her, leaving behind a ripple of nervous laughter and a profound sense of satisfaction. The viral aftermath, as expected, was explosive. Within hours, snippets of the library confrontation were trending. My full-length video, uploaded that evening, broke all previous records. The Karen versus the Catalyst saga became an internet phenomenon, racking up tens of millions of views in the first 24 hours alone. Comments poured in, a mixture of gleeful schadenfreude, praise for the prank's cleverness, and discussions about the Karen phenomenon itself. The clips of Karen's increasingly frantic filming, unaware of my underlying plan, became instant memes. My channel gained millions of new subscribers, solidifying my reputation as the king of the subtle, psychological prank. As for Karen, her infamy was, unfortunately for her, undeniable. For weeks, her face was synonymous with internet memes. Local news outlets picked up the story, albeit often with a humorous slant, but it meant her public profile, meticulously built on self-righteousness, was now one of public ridicule. I heard through the grapevine that she eventually moved, unable to face the subtle smirks and knowing glances she encountered everywhere. While my pranks are never meant to be genuinely malicious or permanently damaging, this one certainly left a lasting impression. It was a potent reminder that the internet is a double-edged sword, and that trying to control narratives with a phone can sometimes backfire spectacularly. For me, the library prank was more than just another viral hit. It was a testament to the power of observation, patience, and turning the tables on those who believe themselves untouchable. As I sat in my studio days later, sifting through the analytics, the glowing comments, and the influx of new ideas, I felt a familiar thrill. The world was full of Karens, full of unsuspecting targets, full of absurd moments waiting to be captured and recontextualized. My work was far from over. And as I closed my laptop, a new idea already beginning to simmer, I knew one thing for certain. The next unsuspicious target was already out there, just waiting for the catalyst to find them.